Cabinet has advised the Western Cape to abandon hopes of being autonomous from the South African government. Now, this was in response to the Western Cape government's proposed legislation that seeks to empower the provincial government to take control of the police, trade and public transport. The Western Cape's proposal was based on the notion that the province is the country's best run against the largely poor performance of the national government. Well, Professor Pierre de Vos is a constitutional law expert at the University of Cape Town, and he joins us to discuss this. Prof, thanks so much. It's good to have you here on the program.
Well, thanks for having me.
So this bill seeks to get the national government to seize control of, as I mentioned, police, trade and public transport to the provincial government that wants it to hand it over. Explain the thinking behind the proposal.
Well, the bill actually doesn't do that. The bill is really a nothing burger, as they say in the US. What it says is that the Western Cape is declaring an intention that they want to exercise their existing powers, some of them shared with the national government, to its full capacity, and then they want to go to the national government and ask them to delegate powers that the national government and not the provincial government has to the provincial government. So and to assign those powers to them. But it's an intention. It doesn't actually try to create any independent powers or to take on any powers itself. So whether that will have any impact, I don't know. Some of these issues, like transport, is a shared competence. Both the national government and the province has power to deal with it, and it depends what legislation is passed by each sphere. It depends on many other aspects how that will work in practice. Some of the other things are national competences, so the only way they could possibly be devolved to the Western Cape is if the national government, at the moment the ANC, controlled government, decides to hand that power to the province. So at the moment, not very likely.
And exactly, I was going to say, I mean, the chances of that happening. But I want to talk about the areas that they're looking at. So is it more, I mean, so as I mentioned, it's transport, policing, energy. They also want the energy, including electricity generation, transmission, reticulation, trade, which is also including international trade, as well as harbours to take control of that. So, I mean, this is basically, in a nutshell, it's sort of wanting to become a little independent state.
Well, that's not what the bill says, but of course, the political rhetoric might be different. Some of these issues, like policing, the Constitution has a very specific arrangement for policing that says it's a national competence. Provinces has a power of oversight, so there's some kind of power, but not the power to actually control anything for the police. So the only way that can happen, and the Western Cape can take that over, is if the national government actually delegates it. The same with the international trade, harbours. The transport is, as I said, a shared competence. So there are some complicated issues that if the Western Cape asserts its powers, which they share with the national government, it will probably in the end up in the Constitutional Court, because this is not an area of the constitutional law that is that well developed. So we're not that sure exactly where the boundaries are between the two. When it's a national competence, we know the province cannot actually take it on unless they are assigned or delegated this power by the national government.
So the minister in the presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, said that the bill is against the democratic spirit of building a unified South Africa. But other than the spirit, what are the chances of success for such a proposal, whether legally or constitutionally?
So in terms of the shared powers, like public transport, there is perhaps room for the province to take on more responsibility, to challenge a little bit the exact divide. On the other issues, it's a political question. It depends on the national government and who is elected and serves in the national government. If they decide not to do so, the Western Cape can do nothing about it, because that's what the Constitution says. The Constitution creates a unitary system, not a federal system. It creates these provinces, but the provinces do not have the same kind of power that you would normally see in a country where there are federal system with independent or regions with some really independent powers.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at some of the issues that have beset the Western Cape, you know, and Cape Town, I mean, it's one of the places where we can give an example that, as much as they say it's the best governed, there's a lot of lawlessness in Cape Town as well. I mean, to the extent of the intervention of the military that's been proposed in certain areas. We saw what happened with taxi warfare that was going on in the buses. I mean, it was a very scary situation there. I mean, is the Western Cape in a position to take on the responsibility of having control over a whole bunch of matters? Or is this what they're saying, that if they controlled, then they could actually curb some of these issues?
Well, this is not really for me to say, because this is something that each voter will decide for themselves. It is so that there has been some instances where the national government has given to some provinces or municipalities, delegated some powers to them. It depends on the issue. You know, in the Western Cape, I think the most dramatic problem is crime. It's huge. The Western Cape government is going to say, well, it is because we are not in control of the police. Whether that is true, I don't know. It might prove, if they are given the power, that it is impossible to fix. So these claims, its politicians should take all of them from both sides, in my case, with a little bit of a pinch of salt.
Yeah, I suppose it is. It is also a matter of opinion, and each party selling itself. That's a fact. But let's perhaps get your thoughts on the City of Cape Town's demand for President Ramaphosa to form a joint working committee on the railway decentralization, because transport falls under this, obviously. And the mayor, Jordan Hill-Lewis, gave Ramaphosa until the end of August to get a cabinet response on the formation of such a committee, or the city would declare an intergovernmental dispute. So the deadline's been missed by the president, of course. What are the chances of a successful outcome for the city on this one? And I think it's also going to come up in Pali today as well.
Yeah, so the public transport is a kind of shared competence with the province, and then the municipality, in terms of the constitution, has competence in terms of municipal public transport. The constitution says that the three spheres of government, national, provincial, and local, that there have to be cooperation, and so there is a whole mechanism for the cooperation. There is a need to engage with one another. That chapter of the Constitution, however, cannot magically force a municipality controlled by one party and a national government controlled by another party. It cannot force them to agree on something, but they have to engage with one another. So to what extent, in this particular case, the demand is valid in terms of the system is difficult to say, because I haven't seen the details of what the arguments by the mayor is, but it's not a preposterous idea that they should meet. There are obligations on both sides. But that doesn't, of course, mean that there will be it requires an outcome this way or that way.
Yeah, I mean, the city is, as we say, want to take over the management of the rail services. This is something they're adamant on, and want the president to confirm the approval of the white paper on national rail policy to devolve rail to capable metros. I mean, does this feed to the view that the Western Cape is pushing for self-governance in this particular instance, and autonomy from the country, almost by using a backdoor means?
Well, the city is obviously a city. It's not the whole region.
Yeah.
There has been, this for me it is in the draft policy of the national government, so it doesn't seem to be very good evidence for this. There is, however, other evidence that the governing party in the Western Cape have sort of formed an informal agreement with other groups, including groups that are claiming that they need the Western Cape to become independent, and that they have a right to this somehow, that the Constitution requires it or allows it, that those are preposterous claims. So having some sort of being in bed, so to speak, with people like that, who they are quite extremist in my view, will obviously raise the kind of questions that you are asking now. Yeah. The rail issue for me is not exactly there yet, because there are actually plausible arguments to be made for it, given that the national government has already indicated that they are thinking about doing this, just that.
On another matter, I mean, the Supreme Court of Appeal yesterday sustained a previous ruling by the High Court in Johannesburg in favour of the DA, compelling the ANC to hand over all information and records of the party, including meeting minutes, WhatsApp conversations, email threads, CVs, all other records of the ANC Deployment Committee since the 1st of January 2013, when President Ramaphosa became the party's chairperson. What are the implications of that judgment, and is it possible to track whether all that information has actually been handed over or not?
Well, we do know from the Zondo Commission and the report from that commission that the ANC says it has lost most of the minutes of the meetings during the time that the current president was chairperson of that meeting. Surprise, it's maybe a bit of a coincidence. How much of this information is available, whether if the ANC fully complies with the order, whether much will come to light, I don't know. It's impossible to say. Whether one would know whether they comply is also difficult, because who knows what documents are available. And also, in my opinion, it is probably, even if you think that the cadre deployment policy is wrong, it's probably not going to, that policy itself are run in formal ways. So the DA will get the documents, if they are available, about formal cadre deployment. But the policy is also, in much more extensive way, run informally at the local government level, wherever. So much of the kind of things that the DA are cross about, and that the Zondo Commission also pointed out, is not going to be covered by this, because it happens in an informal, not in a formal cadre deployment way.
All right, we've got to leave it there. Prof, thank you. Thanks so much for talking to us. Unfortunately, running out of time, we've got to say goodbye to our viewers and to you. Professor Pierre de Vos, who's a constitutional law expert at the University of Cape Town, clarifying the legal standing and practicality of the Western Cape's proposed Provincial Powers Bill, which seeks to empower provincial government to take control of police, trade, public transport, among other issues. But you heard some clarity from the professor there, and of course what was ruled in court yesterday.